Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this annual hearing and for the update. And Mr. Sminsky, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be working with you on such an important area. You know, we're here today to look at the findings in this report. And first, I think it's important that the U.S. is less likely to be reliant on imported energy, but we still remain a net oil importer for the entire forecast period. Within the context of the debate about current export policy, this is a key factor that we have to keep in mind. Second, carbon pollution is still expected to increase even while we remain below the 2005 levels, and this highlights the fact that we must take steps to bend the curve even further downward, given the tremendous cost to our climate and what is already imposing on businesses and communities in my state and around the country. We need to look at policies where we can be mindful that these analyses, as my colleague just said, are predictive about what's happening right now, but not so much 100% certain about what's going to happen in the future. Keeping that in mind, we need to increase energy efficiency, make it a larger variable in the equation, and keep carbon pollution below the 2005 levels. For example, carbon pollution from residential sector is projected to decline by 5% from 2013 to 2040. These reductions come from application and building efficiencies, which more than offset the growth in the number of houses that will need to be heated and cooled. I know a lot of my colleagues appreciate that we can do more to drive energy efficiency solutions into the marketplace, and it's a policy that ultimately pays for itself. Another important finding in the report is the electricity prices are likely to increase because of fuel costs. In the reference case, national electricity prices are projected to rise 18% between 2013 and 2040, and these price projections are driven by coal prices rising by nearly 25% and natural gas prices rising by 88%. In contrast, the new renewable generation technologies, which use wind and solar and fuel, are going to be comparatively less expensive, potentially seeing different technology costs dropping 10 to 20%. And these projections don't even take into account the rapid technology changes that can further drive the cost curve down. So it seems like sensible policies to me that we should still do more to connect these technologies to the electricity grid. And along those lines, I should note that we do have ongoing concerns about EIA continually underestimating the potential of renewable energies in the annual Energy Outlook report, but maybe that's something we can work on for the future. In these projections, renewable energies meet much of the growth in electricity demand. In fact, renewables are likely to become cost competitive in many regions in the coming years. And according to the Department of Energy's own 2014 Revolution report, by 2014, rooftop solar panels cost about 1% of what they did 35 years ago, and solar PV installations were about 15 times of what they were in 2008. So between 2008 and 2014, the cost of PV model declined from $3.40 a megawatt to 79 cents a megawatt. Also in the same report, DOE found similar finding on wind. There seems to be an internal disconnect at the Department of Energy because other offices at DOE are noting how much better these technologies are performing than forecasted, and yet EIA is predicting the same costs under low growth scenarios. So I can't imagine your job, Mr. Sminsky, balancing all of these variables anytime you have this many variables and then you're trying to keep them all on a similar line of a level of whether it's now or in the future. So maybe we can talk again about how we get some of this in the future report. Another example of the end of 2014, the American Wind Energy Association market reported that the United States had a wind capacity of over 65 gigawatts, but the report, your 2013 report, just 2 years ago, projected that wind capacity wouldn't exceed 65 gigawatts until 2034. So in reality, it happened 20 years before that. Many organizations and associations have found the EIA's assumptions are lagging behind the real world when it comes to clean energy development, and these assumptions, if incorrect, drastically impact the projections of renewables and can paint a misleading picture about the power of renewables. While this EIA analysis is very useful, I think we need to take a holistic approach about how different energy sources are faring against others and the policies, and this analysis is just one tool that help us look at market conditions. But I'm a very big supporter of EIA. Actually want to enhance its capacity because I think again, in an information age and energy policy so important and the role you can play on so many different avenues, I think it's very important we continue to strengthen your office and organization, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about that in the Q&A. I'd also like to commend the EA on its announcement that starting in March, it will now be able to provide monthly data on rail movements of crude oil. I suspect that reaching an agreement with the U.S. Surface Transportation Board and Canada's National Energy Board to get this data were not a simple task. But the data show that over the past 5 years, crude by rail shipments have increased 17 times nationally. Let me put it in a percentage. That's a 1,751% increase in the shipment of crude by rail. So 20 billion barrels in 2010 to 370 million barrels in 2014. That is, to say, a big impact on us in the Pacific Northwest. The hard fact remains, the hard facts make it clear. The responsibility lies with policymakers to consider the public and health and safety related impacts of this emerging trend. Neither the oil industry nor the rail industry should enjoy unfettered profits from a shale boom without being required to step up and make sure that they have the safety precautions in place for the kinds of rail explosions that we are seeing across America. So once again, Mr. Shiminsky, thank you so much to your staff for providing this information. I will want to continue to work with EIA to make additional progress in this area. And one other thing I want to mention, a lingering concern about the associated analysis and other pressing topics before the committee, namely the completeness of EIA's crude oil export analysis. In February 2014, Senator Wyden, who was the chair of this committee, and I joined to ask you for a comprehensive analysis of regional price and transportation impacts on the change to current export policies. We live in a part of the country, Washington and Oregon, that depend on Alaska crude oil, and our market has been relatively isolated from the rest of the country. So I'm sure that my colleagues will remember that both Chairman Wyden and Senator Wyden, in both those capacities, constantly talk about this issue. We have to talk about it because we have some of the highest gas prices in the nation, and we're always asking why we have the highest gas prices in the nation with 4 refineries in my state. And so we will not get into all the explanations that we've been given by people, but let's just say that now as we look at the discussion, I think we're having, Madam Chairman, in a few weeks, export hearing, that we want to understand more completely this issue. So from what we've seen, EIA's piecemeal analysis on crude oil exports, there have been no analysis on what this policy might mean for consumers of the Pacific Northwest, who pay, as I said, among the highest gas prices. We see headlines from other organizations suggesting that crude by rail traffic could double if the export ban is lifted. We need EIA to provide some enlightenment about additional analysis on this. And so I don't think Senator Wyden and I are satisfied with where we are, and we want to see this information as soon as possible. So again, Madam Chair, thank you for holding this hearing. And again, Mr. Szymanski, we want more information. That's the bottom line. We want more information, and we want to help build as robust an organization underneath you as we possibly can in an information age where this is such a vital, important issue to our country. Thank you.